Okay, pirates. This week we are going to talk about reputation capital. And obviously, this is one part of our framework for how to build a legendary different career. And this one got a little bit personal in some degrees, which all of them are, but this one channeled a little bit of energy. So, Eddie, do you want to maybe kick it off with how you felt writing this and where some of that energy came from, especially when it comes to having an outcome and really being honest with yourself about whether or not you've had an outcome that can lead to your reputation?
Yeah, in some ways, Christopher, you were commenting about how angry Eddie showed up, and I was like, oh, where? I don't remember that. And there's an element of the Reputation Capital mini book that is very deeply personal because at some level, this is not the culture that I grew up in. Your reputation was your resume, in effect, right? And that it was obviously where you went to school and what kind of profession you were. There's a guy, Stephen he's on like YouTube and TikTok, and he's the emotional damage guy. I don't know if you've seen him. So he's amazing. He makes every Asian American that I know will watch him laugh hysterically and cry at the same time because he mimics his immigrant dad, which is, it's funny because I think he's actually channeling his mom or something like that. But the whole premise is about how the immigrant dad is talking about how his son is just stupid the whole time. And the end, you probably have seen the meme where he goes emotional damage, and that's the whole premise. Is he's like, you were just stupid. Like he has this whole thing that he goes on about, and the immigrant dad basically refers to his son as failure. Let me teach you how to raise your failure in a way that this, and it just goes all the way into the stereotype. The joke is just so extreme, but it's so painfully true, which is Timmy, your next door neighbor or your cousin, like he went to Harvard at 9 and he got a double PhD at 12 and he has 3 jobs and this, it's all of like everything that is your version of Gary VD is like, this is just like very traumatic for me to like, it's funny, but it's traumatic. And so reputation capital, I think, is such a breath of fresh air in that what we are basically saying is none of that stuff matters at all. And it is all about outcomes. And I think this idea is just so true because I think the angry part came out not because immigrant parents are malicious or anything else, but it's just so misguided in that there's so much wasted energy that's directed towards the exact opposite of what an outcome would be. And if you just look at any of like there's a rising swell of kind of Asian American comedians. Ronnie Chang does a great job on his Netflix specials. He'll talk about the obsession that immigrant parents have with.
For the record, I've seen Margaret Cho live.
Yeah, she's great too, right? She's the OG.
By the way, I think she might be the OG. The thing that got me with her years and years and years ago was her riff on her mother. I think that's probably what made her famous. And she would mimic her mother. And she has this whole thing about her mother. I guess they maybe work in or maybe owned a convenience store. I can't remember, but the whole riff is her mother going in and finding the gay porn section and asking what, and I won't say the word, but what such and such meant. And she does it, in her mother's accent and the whole thing. And it is pee yourself funny.
Yeah. Yeah, there's just the whole kind of comedy of like fish out of water, immigrant not understanding what certain things are, as you were saying, Christopher. But what was the shocking part is how much energy is just misdirected. Like when Ronnie Chang of the Daily Show will talk about all this stuff about Asian parents wanting their kids become doctors, have nothing to do with wanting to help other people. They don't even like going to the doctor because they think their doctor is taking their money. And that's the whole point of it. They want their kids to be doctors so they can take money from other people. Like it has nothing to do with the outcome or anything else like that, right? And so it is, I think for me, it is deeply cathartic to write about something and kind of reject the premise of not only what I grew up with, but ironically, I think my experience is just one variation on a theme that so many other people have of, well, the outcome that matters is my resume and my pedigree and all, my title and my paycheck and everything else versus the outcomes that you do for other people, and not knowing that when you make a difference for other people in a meaningful way, that's the capital that matters so much more than a W-2 or anything. It's the gift that keeps on giving. I think my learning that at an early age was so instrumental to my own agency and freedom. I think that I don't even know who the anger is directed at. It's a little bit of like raging at the machine and shaking your fist at the sky in a tornado. But it's a good fight to have because I think there's so many people consumed by it. I was consumed by it. And I think it's my mission in life to get as many people to kind of see the light with this. And so that's why this was important and probably where the source of the anger was. But
I always know you're on a thread that's a serious thread for you when I'm the guy kind of toning it down a little and making it a little easier for people, hopefully, to read. Because
most people think it's the other way around.
Exactly. And so, the interesting thing about pedigree versus outcomes is an interesting one. I have multiple friends who have PhDs in marketing, and I have friends who are marketing professors. And a couple of them been candid and radically honest that they felt like they were not, who were they if they didn't have a PhD in marketing? They couldn't go run marketing or do an advisor or go be a CMO if they weren't didn't have this massive pedigree behind them. And of course, I have incredible pedigree. I mean, I was born to billionaires who gave me billions when I was born. And I went to, all the ding dong schools. So bullshit, right? And so I'm the opposite of that. No GED. And here's the interesting thing. I got to Silicon Valley because at 27 years old, I sold my company to a Silicon Valley-based software company called Vantiv. Shortly thereafter, turned 28, moved from Toronto, Canada, and found myself doing this. And I was having this conversation with one of these PhD marketing folks who's very into this. And he said, well, how often did people ask you where you went to school? And I said, well, I'm happy to answer your question, but I'm curious why you ask. He said, because people ask me all the time what my marketing pedigree is. And I tell them I have a PhD from, I don't even remember the guy's, whatever it was, some ding dong school, I'm sure, given the level of importance this person placed upon it. And I said to him, we'll just call him Jimmy. I said, Jimmy, in my entire career, I cannot remember one time being asked where I went to school or what degree I had. And he, Eddie, was shocked, like almost as if I was lying. And he said, well, how can that be true? I said, I don't know. You'd have to ask all the people that never asked me. But my best guess would be, to use an old Canadian term, I know how to put fucking moose on the hood. And when you can put moose on the hood, no one cares whether you have a GED or an IUD. What they care about is, wow, there's a lot of fresh moose on the hood.
I don't think I've ever heard you describe the story of how you sold your company to Vantiv. Because so obviously a major turning point, but can you go into a little bit about how that happened? Because I'm assuming these things turn on a trifle, and that wasn't a guaranteed deal from the get-go and the like. So how did that happen?
So what happened was I used to do a lot of public speaking. I learned early in my career, and I think we've talked about it a little bit. We've talked about a guy who became a mentor of mine, certainly an inspiration of mine, named Larry DeBover. And I saw him speak at a conference, and it was the first time I'd ever seen somebody break the mold, reject the premise, and take off his suit coat and his tie, anyway, and really go for it. I was like, wow, well, if he can be outrageous in himself, be his awesome, outrageous self, and doesn't stand there and act like a fucking donkey with something up his ass, then I can maybe, quote, let myself go too. And so anyway, I did a lot of public speaking, and I would go and speak at an event. There was no internet, right? So I'd go and speak at an event, and I get a shit ton of clients after I spoke. So I was at one such event like this in Boston. Would it be the Javits Center? Is that right? It was at the Javits Center. Anyway, it's, I don't know, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock that night at the conference. I'm kind of winding down the day, checking email. And there's an email in my inbox from an executive at Vantiv, a company that ultimately ended up acquiring me, saying, hey, saw your talk, we're in the support side of this thing. We're looking to move into sales. You're a Salesforce automation guru, because this was pre-CRM. Love to talk with you. So I talk with him. And so before you know it, he invites me to California to do a day of consulting, give them some feedback on what they might do from a product and marketing perspective as they moved from support into sales. So we do that. And as a part of that, I meet the CEO. And the CEO says to me, what are you doing for dinner? I said, so we end up having dinner. And then he says, look, we need you guys. We need you. I want you to come here and help us do this. And I want to acquire your company and have you move to California and help us break into sales and expand our offering. 27-year-old Christopher. And I can remember distinctly the next day getting on a plane and flying to Denver because another one of my clients was called Corporate Express, if you remember them. Mm-hmm. They were the Office Depot before there was Office Depot. And I can remember talking to, I believe it was the CIO. I think he was the CIO of Corporate Express the next day. And I said to him, he was my client, he and the head of sales. And I remember saying to him, I had the weirdest thing happen to me yesterday. And he goes, what's that? He says, I said, the CEO of Vantive wants to acquire my company and move me to California to help them break into sales and run marketing for them and do all this stuff. And he goes, why would you do that? I said, yeah, I'm not sure. And that's how it started. And there's an important thing there. Why does that happen? Why? You tell me. Why does a 27-year-old kid get sought out by what was at the time an already public company?
He had a gap, didn't like his CMO, was trying to go make the Frodo. So he was like, you know what? Simplest way to do this was I could try to hire Christopher, but probably the better pitch is let me acquire your company.
That's right.
So an acqui-hire, as it were.
Correct. That's essentially what it was, right? This is a boutique company with me and half of somebody else.
Incredible. Was there an incumbent or was there a gap in the CMO role?
There was a radical gap in their knowledge about the Salesforce automation business, what they should build, how they should build it, how they should compete. What did it mean to bring sales and support together?
But you weren't, were you replacing somebody?
No, there was nobody.
There was nobody. Interesting.
Yeah, there was nobody. They made a job for me. Listen, there's two kinds of people, right? There's people who find their place, and if you're that kind of person, God bless you. And there's some people who've always known they wanted to be a vet, and they found their place at 3, and they become a vet. And they're very self-actualized, and God bless them. And then there's some of us who try as we might to find a place, and there's no place. And so we have to make one.
So I will bring in the highly academic world of professional wrestling that I watched as a little kid. Is that when, if I recall correctly, you had I forget what the title was, like the main wrestling belt, which like the Hulk Hogan's would have the world champion.
Yeah, the champion, the heavyweight champion of the world.
But there was another one. There was the Intercontinental Champion, which was like, I didn't even know what that meant, right? It was like not the top tier ding dong one, but it's still pretty good. Like you still had to defeat somebody to win the belt, right? What is fascinating to me is you got the equivalent of the Intercontinental one, CMO. Big deal for a 27, 28-year-old. There were bigger deals to come along the way, but that first belt doesn't have to be the ding dong belt, but the belt establishes, that's the part that I think is interesting, is that once you have a belt, like the BMF belt that you were talking about the other day, the game instantly changes and nothing else really matters. Like that's because I think that's the part that is it's like the ultimate trump card. When you get a belt of some sort, everything falls away. And that's the part that is why I'm obsessed with outcomes. And this
But here's the thing, and this is I think why we wrote this. Belts are earned. Reputations are earned. Personal brands are manufactured bullshit. No one gives you a reputation. You can't give yourself a reputation. It has to be granted by others. And the other thing that's interesting about reputations is their reputations for something. All the bullshit in the personal branding, it's, hey, look at me, I'm having a burrito, right? It's for nothing. They literally want to be fucking famous for nothing. Reputations are earned, and they're earned for something. And the something is outcomes.
I want to build on this because now I want to add it back into the mini, but it's too late. I wonder, Christopher, if we can say reputations are bestowed by somebody higher up on the mountain. And
yes,
there's an aspect of this that I remember Pirate Cole wrote.
Somebody of serious consequence. Yes. As somebody acknowledged by the world, yes, by a universe, says, listen, when Mark Benioff comes out and praises on the cover of our first book, Play Bigger, the book, he's Mark Benioff. People go, oh, fuck, this is the book Mark Benioff says helps you defeat gravity? Maybe I should listen to that book. Maybe Lockheed's not a wanker, right? You're exactly right. In the early days of my career, it was the CEO of Vantiv said this 27, 28-year-old kid is the man that's going to lead us to the promised land.
Yeah. Well, I think Tim Keller, I think he talked about it as there's nothing greater than praise from the praiseworthy. When somebody that is at the top looks down and says, this person is anointed, and I personally bestow like. And what's fascinating is it's not an institution. It is not an organization. It has to be a person of consequence who themselves has the belt and is giving the belt to you. The fact that you earn it, that has been bestowed onto you, comes with, it's almost like being knighted. I'm trying to think of what the right equivalent would be.
No, it is like that. Only Obi-Wan or Yoda can christen you Leia or Luke. You can want to be Leia or Luke all you want, but you don't get to get in a TIE fighter and have a shot at blowing up Death Stars, staying at home in your parents' basement, drinking beer, farting, right? Somebody has to say, this person has the talent to be Leia. This person has the talent to be Luke. And that person, you're absolutely right, who bestows that upon you is somebody who already earned it and then some.
It's somebody who already has a massive amount of reputation capital. They break off a piece and they give it to you, and they invest it into you, and they say, this is what you now have. And you're right, the book jacket, blurb, is exactly that. That's what it's designed. It's somebody who's a ding dong, whatever. They are bestowing onto you their seal of approval. This person has the belt. This person is a person of consequence, and go forward from there.
And it might sound corny to some, but they're using their earned spotlight to throw some shine on you. Actually, I don't know why. I was looking around at some Bill Walton stuff very recently, just Googling around, and I still haven't had the strength or whatever you want to call it to see the ESPN that everybody keeps telling me to see, but I'm not ready for it. But anyway, and what I found was some media outlets published his top 70 favorite books. Bill was an extraordinary reader. He was a stutterer, and his mother was a librarian. And so as a kid, he hid out in his room doing two things: listening to I think it was Chip Hearns. Was that his name? I might be wrong. Anyway, whoever the legendary play caller was, basketball in Southern California.
For the Lakers, yeah.
Yeah, for the Lakers. And reading, because he was a stutterer and an introvert. So he's read a lot of books. He put Play Bigger on his top 70. And he, of course, called me a quasar. I had to look up what a quasar was when he said I was a quasar. But when Bill Walton says, I've read a couple thousand books in my life, and these are my top 70, and he puts your book on that list and calls you a quasar, he is granting you something, right? The NBA said the guy was one of the top 50 players of all time. And he publicly said on TV, buy this book, and I love all things Christopher Lockheed. On national TV in the playoffs.
You know what's amazing is reputation capital, when it gets bestowed on you by somebody up at the higher mountaintop, right? I wonder if people fully understand how it just changes the lighting and the air in the room. Because I remember I did work for the CMO of Samsung. Korean companies are notoriously hard to work for, just very command and control. And everybody there lives in fear of the higher ups. And I did a presentation, and the CMO said nothing, just listening. And at the very end, he goes, this was the most remarkable strategy. He just was just going on and on about it. And you could just tell his inner circle were like, what's going on here, right? And then it's like, painlessly, the room changes, and it's like, because he has bestowed his reputation capital on me, whatever I say is now smells like roses and is 10 times smarter and everything else. And like, just that one thing in the mini book, I wrote about kind of like how my Boston mafia has grown from one project and one client to 14 other relationships and the like. And when that happens, I could walk down the hall at Samsung and people would be like, I need your help. I need your help. And it was just one of those things that, as you said, nobody cares where you went to school at that point. Nobody cares of anything else or where you're from. They just know a person of consequence said, you have the force, and I want some of it, which is why we write in the mini book, you have to know how to replicate it. Like once you've had an outcome, it's not good enough to have had one outcome because people are going to expect it to give you again. And you better darn well sure understand how it works. And not everybody does. There's a lot of there's a lot of 0-hit wonders out there. And there's a lot of one-hit wonders out there.
Yeah, I was trying to remember the name of the band now. There's a band that had, I believe it was the most played song in one of these years. And it's called, it's got a weird name. It's going to come to me. Anyway, this was a band. It was
like them. They were the one-hit wonder.
I keep wanting to call it. It's not Smashing Pumpkins because Smashing Pumpkins
genre?
It was like a pop rock reggae-ish kind of a vibe song. It's called Three Princes. Google for me. Who did Three Princes?
Two Princes?
Katrina.
Yeah.
That band from the 90s.
Two Princes, Spin Doctors.
The Spin Doctors.
Spin Doctors. That's right.
And I've read interviews with them now. It destroyed them as people. They had one of the biggest. Does it say what year? I think it was the biggest selling record of whatever year that was.
1992. It was released in 1992. Yeah, I'd have to figure out when it became the one-hit wonder. Early 90s.
And they thought they'd made it, and they hadn't, and they never did. And
I remember the song. I can hear it in my head.
That's a great song. And I think, if I remember the interviews correctly, I don't know if they ever said this, but it was the impression I got, let me say it that way, was their lives would have been meaningfully better off had it never happened. Being a one-hit wonder is very hard. Listen, I know a guy who I won't name, who in the beginning of the social boom, when the category was taking off, all this guy ever wanted was to be on the Forbes 400 list. So he started a company and he rode the social category boom, and he created a subcategory that boomed, and he became a billionaire. And there was a point in time where some of the most prestigious venture capital firms in the world had his face on their homepage, and all the magazines wanted to hear what he had to say. And he was the man. And I met him long before this. And then the company blew up and became a joke. And he became a joke. And he's a billionaire who's a joke, who nobody wants to spend any time with. And I have often wondered about this, Eduardo. It's like, if you could be a billionaire with a reputation as a joke, would you want it? Or would you rather be meaningfully less than a billionaire with a reputation earned over a 35 career that you're really proud of? It's an interesting question.
It's a great question.
And I know this guy, not super well, but well enough to know that he gets up every day, and he has for decades, because his company blew up more than 15 years ago at this point, trying to find a way back into not being a joke, being the butt of a joke. This was the guy that had it all and fucked it up and was a loud, proud asshole, and now literally nobody wants to do anything with him. And all he ever wanted was to be on the Forbes 400 list, and all he ever wanted was to be one of the main guys in Silicon Valley. He wanted to be, it was a childish high school thing, right? He wanted the it girls to make him an it girl, and he thought if he got to the Forbes 400 list, he would be an it girl, and he did, and he's still not an it girl, and it crushed him. You can tell.
It's fascinating where if you are a one-hit wonder, or worse, a 0-hit wonder, your resume, as it were, has a half-life, and it declines in value every year. And so I have a smaller version of that a guy that I know came out of school, was the number 4 employee at one of these hot companies out in the .com, made enough money to never work again, right? But has not had any kind of work of consequence since then. And it's you think that's the goal, is to be rich and you don't have to work, but there's nothing of real substance there. It's fleeting. There's other people that I know who are trust fund, inherited this and that, and they manufacture their significance, and whether it's the cars or they're supposed, it just doesn't work, and they end up having personal problems in their lives. And then this isn't the same thing, but there's a guy that I know who was very, very kind to my kids at a conference that we were both speaking at. And he had great jobs. Like, this guy was the CEO of a well-known CPG company, great branded beverage. And what he told me was fascinating. The day before and after he had the job and didn't have the job, he goes, everybody wanted my time before that. It was like night and day. The moment I was no longer CEO, nobody cared what I thought. Nobody wanted my time. And I was kind of looking at him and like, it's so bizarre. But he was, and he wasn't sad about it. And he went on to keep doing great things and everything else. But he was just commenting like, it's fleeting. Your resume, your title, all those things are just money that is not tied to a reputation. Doesn't really make you significant. It makes you kind of a joke, as you said. Whereas your reputation,
he's still a billionaire.
capital,
There's still people who want to tickle his ivories because he's a billionaire, but he's a joke. He's the guy that founded that company. Oh, he's that.
And it's the narrative. You're a joke. You got lucky. You can't do it again. Whatever. But like
it's whatever that is, right? Whatever that one-hit wonder thing is.
It's scary, and it can ruin people.
And it's sad when you spend the whole rest of your life. This guy's success and billionaireness came when he was, I don't know, I'm going to guess in his, so he's in his late 50s today, maybe even early 60s. I don't know. And he's a joke, and he knows that everybody thinks he's a joke.
But you know what's fascinating is that where if there's this half-life of your resume, reputation capital, they're like rabbits in coat hangers. It multiplies. And once you've done it once and you understand it and you can do it again, then you don't really have to do much. The people keep seeking you out. And once you have figured out, yes, my reputation capital was predicated on this one outcome. I worked really hard to figure out how that outcome happened, my superpower, what needed to be true for that to happen. I can do it again. I can explain it again. I can teach other people to do it again. And then that grows in significance, almost like a compounding effect of an investment. Whereas the other one is like a sugar high. It's easy come, easy go. And it's so fascinating that this is just not taught in any kind of professional lens, and it's not really taught culturally. I don't know of any culture that talks about it this way, because I don't know. I mean, I could be wrong on that. But
the other thing too that's important, I think, in this, as you were talking, for whatever reason, I was thinking about this guy named Mark Randolph, and he's been on my podcast. He wrote a great book, and most people have no idea who he is. And I actually think he's totally fine with it. He's a billionaire. And the reason he's a billionaire is that he's the founder and original CEO of Netflix. Most people don't know Reed Hastings, who's the CEO now, or the co-CEO. He's really more of the chairman, I think, now. But he was the CEO who really made the company, was the original angel investor, because Reed was a founder of a company called, I believe it was Pure Software. It merged with a company called Atria to become Pure Atria, and I'm not sure which one he was the CEO, but I'm almost positive it was Pure. And that was a B2B software company. Anyway, long story longer, if you're the founder of Netflix, that's an amazing thing. Well, after that, he went on to found another B2B company that was in the analytics space. Blanking on its name, maybe Lookout was it? I think it was called. I don't know. It was a B2B kind of analytics, cloud analytics play. Well, he sold that fucking thing for, I don't know, a ton to Google. And so he's had multiple hits. And so he's way earned his Obi-Wan. And if you're like that, and he's been involved with lots of others and he's done lots of other stuff, but if you're like that and you have one big one and a whole bunch of others that were great but would never eclipse that, I mean, it's hard to pull that off twice, almost never happens. Be okay with that. He's great being the founder of Netflix. And one of my favorite actors of all time is a guy named Henry Winkler. Winkler played arguably the most iconic character in the 70s on TV. Arthur Fonzarelli, the Fonz on Happy Days. And this guy has gone on to produce movies and I think write and be in other things and he's had the most incredible career you can have. And the Fonz used to wear a leather jacket, and every time he showed up, he'd put his thumbs up like this, and he'd go, "Hey, Fonzie," right? Well, this guy's, I don't know, 80 fucking years old or something like that now. And when people meet him, they go, "Hey, the Fonz," right? And he gets asked all the time in interviews, like, you have this career and you've had all these other things and la la la, and everybody reduces it to that. How does that make you feel? And he says, great. How lucky am I that a piece of work that I did 50, 60, whatever it is now, years ago for him is still remembered today fondly by people. Or in the case of a Mark Randolph, yeah, he did this other company who I can't remember because Netflix is so big, I can't remember his other billion-dollar outcome, right? And so there's a flip side of this, right? Which is sometimes it's like, I'll never forget, Paul McCartney was being...
Wait. Kat had something she wanted to jump in.
Oh, sorry.
I'm just getting into the practical tactical because I think something that we talked about in the mini book and that we've actually talked a lot about with our students in the academy is, so you have these people who bestow this reputation on you, right? They give you a little part of their reputation. They give you a shot, which is also what we talk about in the relationship capital book coming next. But the interesting part here is we've seen that unless somebody gives that to you and acknowledges what you do and why it was incredible, you might not recognize it. And one thing that we talked about in the mini book was sometimes you're the last person to realize your results, or you don't quite understand your superpower, or you're not sure which one to choose. Eddie, this happened with Thomas in our academy workshop. You know, he's trying to build this new category, but he didn't realize he had all these people knocking on the door saying, hey, I want you to come do this work for me. He's like, no, I've got these other things going on. I don't need to do that work. When really a little pivot could actually turn that into his superpower. And so one thing that I did want to talk about is just this gap between where you think that you excel and where other people see your impact. And we talk about that. That's one of your biggest growth opportunities. So I don't know if you both had experiences with this. Christopher, you've talked about it a little bit, and you asked VCs in the beginning of your career, hey, you know, what am I good at? Why do you keep coming to me? Right. So maybe that's part of a story we can tell. And Eddie, I know you have your own story. I have my own story, but I just want to make sure that we kind of speak to this for people who might not know what their results are. So they're not able to build a strong reputation because they're not sure which direction to build in.
You should tell your story first.
Well, I can tell a little bit of my story about how I came to Category Pirates. And this goes back to the finding one person who taps you on the shoulder. And for me, that was former pirate Cole. I actually met him at an internship.
You're never a former pirate.
You're always a pirate.
He's always Pirate Cole.
Pirate Cole.
And he has a spot on the ship waiting when he's ready.
So
should
Cole,
he be ready?
If you hear this. So I actually met him. I was doing a college internship in Chicago that I think I had applied for randomly online. And it was a marketing agency. It was a small team, less than 12 people on this small marketing agency team. And Cole was one of the people. He was a copywriter for the company. I came in as some sort of marketing communications intern. I was helping them build plans for the different businesses that they worked on. At one point that summer, Cole and I were handing out pizzas to people on a boat. So we go way back. And I didn't work directly with Cole at the internship, but it was a small team. We were all working at the same table. We were around each other for a couple of months. And, you know, fast forward, what was it? Maybe 4 or 5 years later, after I graduated, he reached out to me one day and was like, hey, I'm building this company. And I remember what he said to me, which goes back to reputation and results, is he said, I remember when you came into Idea Booth, which was the company we both worked at. He said, you organized things in a way that nobody else at the company had organized things previously, right? And he's like, we need that at our company. We don't have anybody to organize things. So can you come organize things at this company? And I think I was their fourth person on the team, second hire, their first editor on the team. And we scaled the team to 20 people. I managed all of the behind the scenes ops process of it. I was teaching the editorial team. That company, eventually they shut it down and we weren't working together anymore. But a couple of years later, again, tapped me on the shoulder and said, hey, I have this company I'm working at called Category Pirates, and we kind of need somebody to help organize things. Can you come and help us organize things? And it obviously has turned into a lot more than just organizing things. But it was one of those threads of kind of like you with Clint, Eddie, and you, Christopher, with all the VCs. Once somebody kind of taps you and continues to hire you and bring you on for similar things, you can recognize and say, okay, I'm really good at keeping things organized. I'm good at getting people together. I'm good at facilitating conversations. I'm good at whatever it is that you're good at. And, that can evolve over time. I was originally probably hired for organization and structure, and I still have part of that. And that's what led us to create the academy. And that's what led us to create other products. But that doesn't mean that you can't have other skills and you can't grow other skills. You still can. And I've become known for other skills as well. But there's some starting point that you have to be able to recognize. And oftentimes, I think that's that person with more experience who recognizes that in you. That's my story.
And hopefully the lens that we're providing for folks is that in the simplest way, if you can cultivate your different superpower in the beginning, like your organizational skills in a marketing group that was probably more creative. So that's your first different superpower. And you knew you had it, but somebody else really acknowledged it for you, yes? And that's all it takes. Because at the simplest level, the path to a legendary career, and I say this like a start point for thinking, not like an end point for thinking, is I cultivate my unique, different superpower. I connect that to making a difference for others, and then I get paid for that difference. At some level, it is that simple.
Well, and it's funny that not only is it that simple, I think sometimes people think it's very rational. Sometimes it's just raw emotion. Because like I think of some of the other people recognizing, hey, you have a superpower here or there, like came out of a couple things, laziness and trying to have some fun and just kind of like geeking out over stuff. So I forget if I think we've written about this, but maybe I feel like I've said this story before, but early on, Christopher calls it spreadsheet kung fu, but one of the first things that I did was we had this standard analysis that was done was like, hey, look, if you'd have a table with numbers, and if something was 20% higher than the average, put a box around it so that people could see that that's a spike high. And if it's 20% below the average, put a circle around that number so people know that it's a below average number or whatever else it was, right? And back in the day, it was very manual. You take a spreadsheet, you put it into a PowerPoint document, and you'd have these admins and production assistants just taking boxes and putting them on there, and the consultants would draw like them by hand, and it was so stupid. And I remember coming into this and being like, number one, this is really stupid. Number two, I don't want to do any of this stuff because like it was tedious and high risk, because if you screw it up, then, which was easy to do, then obviously that's not good. So what I ended up doing was, out of pure laziness and just kind of like, this is stupid, how can I make my life simpler with this? And then I was looking through Excel, which I was teaching myself, and I was like, I think I can automate this. And I built my first macro, and
that's when the kung fu starts.
That's when the kung fu started.
Right, because the macro makes it do things by itself, and the screen's going.
It was the equivalent, the 1-inch punch. You push this button, and it all just kind of happened magically. And then I remember, like when I did it, you would have thought I created fire. Everybody in the company were like, "What?" And
yeah,
I must have saved
now, watch as
thousands of
fire.
hours. Yes. Like, and it just. Now, the sad part, like I saved thousands of man hours. I'm sure that was just filled in by other tedious and stupid things. That's neither here nor there. But like that one was somebody saying, okay. And they thought it was ingenuity or analytic skills. I was just being lazy and angry that I was like doing stupid things. That was kind of the first thing. And then, storytelling was another one. And at some level, I was trying to figure out how to get clients to do things that were hard. And I knew that I could kind of educate them rationally, but then I decided, like, you know what? Entertainment will go a long way. And you can't be 90% entertainment, 10% education, but some sort of the right blend. I'm sure, Christopher, you'll educate me on some sort of a wine blend or whatever that might work. Like, people will actually do stuff if you can make them laugh and then make them feel good. They are in a mood to hear something, like, okay, and then you can kind of get them to act on it. Every presentation that I ever did, at some point, I let off with a story, and it pissed some people off. They're like, what are you doing? Because not all of them were good stories. Some of them were long story longers, right? But it was the first 90 seconds to 2 minutes I took as like, I got this time. You can't kick me off stage right now. Maybe the gong will come eventually and pull me off stage. But they knew I had the goods with the data and the strategy. So I indulged myself to have a little bit of fun, to tell a story. And that became my hallmark, was like, people would come, they would look forward to my meetings because they were like, there's going to be story time with Eddie at some point, and I'm going to tell something with it. And it just made me a much more effective strategist, because I knew I had the rational argument, but a story with a good analog and a metaphor would go a long, especially if it was entertaining, would go a long way. And so like, these superpowers are not necessarily like, I'm going to create splice the atom. They're actually born out of very human things. Like, I don't want to do this. This is really stupid. I'm going to make this fun because this is a little bit boring.
Well, I'm reminded of something as you're talking. So I cultivated the skill to speak in public, and I like black. I think Johnny Cash is right. You can't wear enough black. I have a very large black t-shirt collection. And so I was invited one time at this one particular company to come do a big speech in front of, I don't know, a couple thousand people, whatever it was. So I did. And I wore a black suit with a black t-shirt and a pair of red Prada shoes. So imagine a bald dude on stage in front of several thousand people by himself, big stage. You know what these are like. You've spoken on these stages. And I'm wearing all black except for bright red Prada shoes. And I gave a hell of a speech. And guess what people remember? The red shoes. And so I started to wear them at every big speech. And when I became the CMO of Mercury, I wore them at every big event. They became such a cultural touchstone at Mercury. I shit you not. The CEO of HP Software was a guy named Tom Hogan. And when HP acquired Mercury for $4.5 billion in 2006, when that was a lot of money, shortly thereafter, we did this huge party to kind of celebrate. And it was the first cultural moment of bringing together staff, the team from HP Software and the team from Mercury. And we did it at Mercury. It was this big outdoor event. What does Tom Hogan do? He walks on stage wearing a suit, a dark suit, and you guessed it, red shoes. And he said why he was wearing the red shoes. It was an acknowledgement of our culture. And so my point is, do you have to have a superpower to wear red shoes? No, you just have to have a little bit of swagger. And if you're willing to be different with some swagger and back it up, you can accidentally create a cultural touchstone that is so powerful that when you get acquired, the CEO of the acquiring entity wears something like your shoes as a tip of the hat, not to you. He's tipping the hat to the 3,000 or 4,000 people at Mercury. He doesn't give a fuck about me. I mean, he says nice things about me, but he's doing it because he knows what it will mean to them, because they know what the shoes are. And all I did was put on a pair of shoes. And then I could never go. I couldn't give a speech without them anywhere in the world. I traveled. I still have them. I traveled around I think I did 3 trips around the world in one go with those shoes, because I couldn't, the entire time I was at Mercury when I gave a speech, if I didn't wear the shoes, they thought either something was wrong or the speech wasn't important. So ta-da, the red shoes.
The red shoe swagger. Never heard that story before.
You collect a lot of them in a 30-something year career, young Jedi.
It says Superman had a red cape and Christopher had red shoes. So
I think that goes to show that, Christopher, what you were saying is, when you develop a reputation, when you kind of become known for something, you create this bigger movement, right? That sometimes it affects a whole team. Sometimes it affects an acquisition. Sometimes it makes a huge difference in the world. I think of the guy who did Humans of New York and all of those stories that he told, and how now they're raising millions of dollars for people to help them out. And it becomes a movement, right? It can become something much bigger than yourself. And you know, you're known for a piece of that, right? You know that you have a part of that. And I think this is going to kind of lead into the relationships that you build and how these interconnect together in the following weeks and to come.
There is an important thing before we leave this topic that is an interesting thing to pull, a thread to tease out, which is reputations are earned, as we've talked about. And when you earn one, and knowing damn well that you have a reputation that you earned, it's a tremendous sense of self-satisfaction, self-actualization. And you can even have moments where you go, you know what? I'm proud of myself, because you earned a reputation. And it must be bestowed, as you talked about, Eddie. There's another part of this that is important, however. If you try too hard and you care too much, the world knows it and you're a donkey. And so when Joan Jett sings, I don't give a damn about my bad reputation, of course she cares about her reputation, that she has a bad one. So there is a part of you can't develop a legendary reputation if you're trying too hard. That's why personal branding is such a joke, right? So there's a level of Joan Jett, of fuck you, of I don't give a fuck. I don't give a damn about my bad rep. I don't care about my reputation. What I care about is the work. What I care about is the results. What I care about is making a difference. What I care about are the people I'm surrounded with and what we can produce together and the relationships that we build, particularly focused on a mission that matters for others. And so I care more about the outcome than I do about how you think about me. And unless there's at least some, again, all of this stuff is a spectrum or a scale. And I'm pretty far over on the don't give a fuck scale. But the truth is, I do give a fuck. But I don't give a fuck. That's why I have a reputation that I give a fuck about, if that makes any sense. So there's this thing that you appreciate and admire and enjoy and acknowledge that is fragile and radically earned over many, many years, and therefore you treasure it, and you don't give a fuck at the same time. It's one of those two things need to be true for the one big thing to be true. The reason I have a reputation is because I don't give a fuck what you think of me.
That's the common theme, I think, is anyone with reputation capital, they're obsessed with the outcome above anything else. And I actually think the reason why people can bestow, somebody up the mountain can bestow part of their reputation capital to you is not just the outcome that you achieve. When they see that you are as obsessed about the outcome as they are, they trust, even if you swing and miss, the next time you'll get up and you'll swing again and you'll swing again, and until the outcome is actually achieved. That's the reason why they know that when they bestow their reputation capital on you, it'll pay back 100-fold with that. So that obsession is the thing that matters the most, because even if you don't get it now, they know the trajectory that you will get it. And that to me is the part that does make me the angriest. When I was at my old firm, people are actually, I remember my partner Clint, the company that we were running the other couple of years ago, I was telling this at a dinner table. He was giving a very hard message to the sales team about, like, you guys need to be better leaders. You're not treating people well. You need to be tough on performance, not on people, this and that. And it was getting a little uncomfortable for me. And so I thought I would just share, like, well, I was a really bad leader of people. And they all kind of stopped and looked at me, because they're like, oh, he's Eddie, he's a chill Hawaii guy or whatever and stuff. And I was like, I was extremely hard to work for. And they were like, what? I'm like, oh, yeah. You did not enjoy working with me. If you were not obsessed with the outcome, I was very, very hard on you. If you were obsessed with the outcome, you had a lovely time and you loved it and you sought me out and we would do great things together. Those people have all done great things, but it wasn't so much that I didn't tolerate fools, which, I mean, there's truth to that. If you cared about promotion, your comp, any of this other stuff other than the outcome, I just didn't have time for you. And
Yeah.
I didn't have any respect for you either.
Yeah. I got a great story about this. So when I was at Mercury, we had this one particular guy, we'll just call him Jimmy, who was in product marketing. And it was promotion season. And we promoted a few people in product marketing to vice president of product marketing for the product they were responsible for. And this individual was a senior director. And we didn't promote him. Very good guy, very talented, not ready, had not earned it. So he came into my office all blustered and angry and so forth and so on. And his argument to me was, not only should we have promoted him, but he's ready to be a CMO. And it was well known in the company at the time that twice a year, myself and the head of engineering swapped jobs. I took his calendar and he took mine. So this is well known in the company. So I was sitting at my desk. I had my monitor here. He was sitting on the other side of the monitor. I said, all right, you think you're ready to be a CMO? Great. I took the monitor, I spun it around right in his face, and I clicked on my calendar for the following week. I said, here's my calendar for the next week. Want to take it? I'll take yours, you take mine. No bullshit. He was frozen. So until you tell me you're ready to take my calendar for next week, you're not ready. You're full of shit. And the learning there is simple. When somebody gives you the opportunity, you take it. And if you don't, you're not ready. Right? When Cole gave you that opportunity, Katrina, you took it, whether you thought you were ready or not. This guy, Jimmy, had a bowel movement in my office when he looked at my calendar. If you're ready to be the CM, great, take it. I don't give a fuck. I'll take the week off. I could use a vacation. Here's my calendar. And so not only was he not ready, not only did I call his bluff, but he blew his shot. I gave it to him and he didn't take it.
So when someone opens a door, you better take it.
Yeah, you never know. This is a very important learning. There was an interesting thing that just happened, regardless of your political leanings or beliefs or so forth, with an extraordinary American artist named Carrie Underwood. And she was to sing America the Beautiful, if I'm remembering correctly, part of the inauguration ceremonies for President Trump. And we all saw this. There was supposed to be a taped musical accompaniment, and the tape doesn't work. We saw this. We all saw this. And she kind of looks at the audio guy or whatever. I forget exactly what she says, but she sort of nods and says, I'm going to go for it. And she says to the audience something to the effect of, let's sing this together, something along those lines. And she sings a cappella. And this happens in seconds. Now think about that for a second. How many people in that moment would shit themselves? And anybody who's ever had to sing Happy Birthday knows singing a cappella for most people is terrifying, even if you're a great singer. As a matter of fact, if one thing to know, one of the things that is the scariest about a cappella is knowing what the first note is. Because if you're a professional singer like Carrie is, let's say she started in a higher key, that might mean her ability
Bad
to
things
hit.
could happen.
Correct. That might mean her ability to hit the higher notes, not so much. If she starts in a lower key, that might mean her ability to hit the lower notes, not so much. Right? She's got to pick a spot and go. There's no opening chord. If you pay attention, you'll hear a lot with a cappella. Somebody will hit a bell, or somebody will play a chord. If you listen very closely, or sometimes it'll be in the earpiece and we can't hear it. They'll give them the opening note. She had none of those things. And in a very few seconds, in a moment of terror, Carrie Underwood said, that's what it takes. And she made us all cry. And even if you're not a fan of the president or any of that, if you saw that video after the fact, if you didn't go, wow, that's one of the greatest performances, you're not paying attention. I don't give a damn about my bad reputation.